Hey guys, it's Maymay, and today we are going to create this. Last week, Mother and I were shopping together and we saw something that looked a lot like this. A very loosely wrapped burlap canvas with a beautiful Christmas scene on it. And I knew I had this scrapbook paper and I thought I'm going to turn this scrapbook paper into this piece of decoration for my home. So I thought I would take you guys along with me. I'm just going to do a voiceover on this one because I filmed it kind of as I went. So I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think. Let's get started. So the first thing you'll need is a canvas. And I chose an 8 by 10 canvas because I thought it would really show off the part of the scrapbook paper that I really want to focus on, which was the Santa Claus itself. So this one is a thin canvas, but if you have one of those thicker ones, it'd be really pretty to do something like that too. I don't know if you guys have seen these in the store, but they've gotten pretty popular where you take the canvas and put it on a pedestal and then have some kind of little finial at the top and a beautiful canvas in the middle. But this is how I'm starting, with a plain white canvas. Next, my friend Judy sent me some burlap in a rack recently, and I love this burlap. It feels very much like a gunny sack almost. I don't know if you guys like a feed sack. We'll say it like that. That's more southern. And what I did was I just cut away a piece that I needed that was big enough to cover the front of the canvas and also wrap around the sides of the canvas. So that way I knew that the entire white portion of the canvas would be covered. Now, as you can see, the white shows through the burlap, and I wasn't really sure that that was going to work, so I decided to paint it just in case some of that white was to show through. I felt like I might cover it all, but you can never be too sure. Now, this brown covered really well. I thought it was a really good brown color for this too. If in hindsight, I wouldn't have had to cover the center of the canvas, but because I wasn't sure where my paper was going to end on the edges, I thought I'm just going to go ahead and paint the entire canvas. It was better to do that now than to have to go back later after waiting on it to dry and have to maybe touch up or add to the brown so that none of the white showed through the burlap. So I do take the time to paint the entire canvas, and then we just sit it aside to dry. And now for the fun part. This is some recollections paper that I know I've had 3 years at least. But I felt like there was one piece of the Santa left. I knew I had used one of them for a card one year. And I was like, ah, there it is. I was so excited to find it because I was hoping I had that one piece left. I think that Santa picture is so pretty. And I've kind of hoarded it for a long time until I could find exactly what to do with it. And I think this is it. Now, the way these canvases are done, the edges of the paper are very distressed, almost to the point that they blend in on the edges to the burlap on the canvas. So what I'm going to do first is cut down this paper to fit my canvas, because obviously I don't want to work with all that extra paper because that would take forever. So I cut this down to an 8 by 10 size because I know that's the size of the front of my canvas, and that's a good starting point. So here's where the trial and error comes in. I have this nail file that I've had for a long time in my craft room, and I thought, well, I'll just sand these edges down and make them very, very thin, and we'll be in business. Well, this was taking a while, and it was distressing the edge, but it wasn't making it as damaged as I needed it to be. So I worked with this for a while and folded the paper in ways I didn't want to, as you can see, and then I came up with a different idea. So I don't know if you know this or not, but my water bottle in my craft room is an old Windex bottle. You can see the tip of it there, so it sprays a lot, and that's okay, especially for this way I'm doing this. I decided to wet the edges, and then I started to sand again. Something I learned through the process is if you'll wet the page and let it sit for a little bit and let that water kind of, soak in, it will, it'll work faster. Now, I don't want to see the shape of the paper at all. Like, I don't want any straight edges. So I'm going to work this until that paper is so thin that it is literally see-through on the edges and it will no longer have the square shape. And I do the same thing all the way around the page. Now, something you should know is that this makes a pretty big mess, but it's no big deal. It's just paper pulp and you can clean it up. But you can see how I've started to distress it, and I mean really distress it. I cannot stress enough that what makes this so unique is how the edges of the paper literally melt into the canvas when you glue it down to your background. See all that goo that it creates? But you just clean it up periodically. And the wetter the paper is, the more easily damaged it is, but it also, you have to have a lighter hand. So you have to get the feel for it. You might even want to practice on a piece, especially like if it's not your last piece with Santa on it and you just kind of go to town. I probably should have thought about that, but luckily it worked out. So if you have some paper you can just practice on, I would do that. But I literally scrubbed and rubbed this paper all the way around until I got a very nice damaged edge. Now you can really see how much I've been scrubbing and rubbing because my mat is all out of whack because I have been rubbing this thing like crazy. But this is, look, I bring it back. That's good. Okay, so this is an important part. I cut this Santa Claus paper down to 8 by 10, which would obviously cover the entire front of my canvas, but I knew I'd be distressing the edges. Now at the top, I knew I had some extra room, so I wanted to leave myself that so I could take that off and be able to see the edges of the canvas around it, but I didn't know how much room I needed. So what I do here is I go ahead and I start to distress it, and you see how that tears? That is perfectly fine because I've got to bring some of that height down anyway, or else I'll cover up the entire canvas. So I start to distress this and kind of get it sort of even, and then I just kind of hover the page over my canvas and look at it and see how long, how much more I need to take off. And actually, although I took off a good bit here, I had to take a little more off too. Notice that tear in the paper? I love it. I wanted that to happen and it did, so that's good. The more damage, the better. So here it is, all distressed and down to the right size, and I am in the zone, so I am not even worried about that crooked mat at this point, obviously. And all of the little paper pulp is still stuck to it, so this is me trying to get all that little paper pulp off, and then I'm going to sit it to the side to dry. Now we're going to bring the canvas back over, and it is not 100% dry, but I'm not worried about that because we're going to cover that up anyway. So I'm going to use some Mod Podge and a really old brush. This brush has seen many better days, but it works good for this kind of application. Now the Mod Podge I'm using, if you notice, was a gloss Mod Podge. The reason I'm using this is because this is a full bottle that I had and my matte finish is kind of low and I want to save that for the part that's going to show. So for this, what I'm doing is I want this to stick the burlap down. So you're not going to see the gloss because the burlap is going to be on top of it. Also, I'm going to be very heavy-handed with this. I want this to soak into the burlap and hold it in place. So you're going to see me and go, that is too much Mod Podge. And it might have been, but it did not seep out and it didn't cause me any problems. But I just wanted to make sure that this burlap was going to soak into it and cover the front and stay snug to the front of the canvas so that my picture would not have too many wrinkles when it finally got put on. So notice I've added some wax paper because I was making a big mess. But I have it coated nice and wet, and here comes the burlap. Now, if you are like me and you do not like glue on your hands, warning, that's what's fixing to happen. That glue is going to seep through and it's going to get on your hand, but it's not that big of a deal, and you can wash it off. But you do want to make sure you get a good adhesion of that burlap. Because if you don't, any imperfections on the canvas itself are going to show through in your paper later. And it's not terrible, but you do want to try to get that top part really smooth. The sides can be rough and rugged, but the front, you want it really smooth. Now we're really stretching, okay? I was going to Mod Podge the sides now, but that was taking way too long. And I have this stapler in my craft room, and I thought, I'm going to see how hard this is to go through that wood. And I'm going to be honest, it was super easy to staple through that wood. And this is a plain old desk stapler. So if you have a staple gun, it would be perfect. But this guy worked amazing. It even did the corners well. So I just decided I'm stapling this back down because I just don't want to wait for it to dry. I'm very impatient, especially with mixed media, and I refuse to pull out my heat tool this time. I don't know why, but sometimes I just don't want to do that. So here I do my first attempt at a miter, and it's not the best because I didn't do it right, but I remember the one that I saw at the store was not very good either, and so I didn't stress about it very much because I remember thinking, whoever did this just sloppily did it, but it looks amazing. So I kind of got sloppy. So as you can see, we're getting to the finishing part, and look how easy those staples go in. It must be that wood, maybe some, is it balsa wood that's really easy? I mean, those staples went in like it was nothing. So I finished wrapping the burlap around, and then I'm going to turn it over, and you can see that the Mod Podge is still pretty wet. See? So I'm going to sit that aside and let it dry. So here you can see the canvas. Now if you look really closely, you'll see that Mod Podge is not totally dry, and that's because I am way too impatient for that. So I sat it aside and decided where I was going to go, and then I just said, I'm fixing to add more Mod Podge so it doesn't have to dry all the way. Now this Mod Podge I'm using is a matte finish Mod Podge because I don't want any shimmer across the whole front of the canvas. But my bottle is very, very empty, so I had to go find a stick so I could get the Mod Podge to actually come out because it does not want to come out. You see me holding it here? It's not happening. Once I add the stick, things start moving, and I'm using a lot of Mod Podge. And it's going to seem like it's too much, but I really want this paper to feel like it's part of the canvas. That was what interested me so much with the piece we saw at the store, the original piece, is that it seemed like the canvas was painted on the burlap. I mean, the paper was painted onto the burlap canvas, but you really could tell it was paper. So I thought, if I can get this good and wet, this will really stick to this burlap really well. And that's what I was going for. So you're going to see me use a lot of Mod Podge here, and I need to go to the store and get some new Mod Podge. So I have flipped it over and I'm adhering it down to the back. And at first I thought I'm not going to put any Mod Podge on the top of this. I'm going to leave it very raw paper feeling. But the more I put this down and the more I rubbed it, I thought I really think that this would do better if it had a sealant on it and it would last longer. So I do eventually decide to go ahead and put the Mod Podge on top too. What I'm doing here is trying to get a very good meet between the two. I want them to not have very many air bubbles in it. I'm trying to get as few as possible because, like I said, I'm trying to match what I saw in the store. And it was probably made by machine, so it was more perfect, right? But this one, I'm just melding it in with my hands and letting the edges of that paper, which is still slightly damp, kind of sink into that burlap, and it really helps with the texture. Now for the Mod Podge on top, and again, I'm going to use a lot, and I'm going to meld it into that paper, into that burlap. I can't say that enough because the heavier it is into the background, the more professional it looks. This is not something that looks like it's sitting on top of the canvas. It really looks like it's part of it. It will make you kind of go, how is that canvas not show, how is it cut away like that? It's really cool. That's how Mom and I did. We're like, how in the world is that canvas on there and you can see the burlap around it? It was pretty neat. So I tried really hard to get this to feel like an actual painted on piece. So now I have it on really good, and I'm rubbing Mod Podge around on the exposed burlap too because I like the texture that I'm getting from the Mod Podge, and I thought if I could continue that out, it'll really add to the kind of cohesiveness of the look of the paper. So now I really do walk away and let it totally dry. So even if you want to leave it overnight, that's fine. I didn't. I walked away, had dinner, probably waited a little hour after dinner, and came back and finished. Now this part might seem like overkill in the end, but I'm taking some white gesso and I am putting it on a very soft fluffy brush, and the idea is to kind of erase the line between the paper and the burlap even a little more. The original piece that I saw, I'm telling you, you had a hard time trying to figure out where the paper started and stopped on the burlap. So I thought maybe if it kind of looked like there had been white there before and it kind of wore away to leave this paper there, I was trying to go for that. And it's just paint. I thought if it doesn't work, I can always distress it later and kind of cover it up. But I rub it in with my finger some to really kind of erase that line. And I think you can tell here that it is doing that. You don't, in this particular instance, I don't want the paper to look very different from the burlap. I want it to feel like it had actually been there for years and the edges have worn away and left what is there with the Santa Claus. Now because I rubbed this in with my finger and did it very dry, it dried really quick and I was able to come back and get some of my distress ink and an old dauber. This is not a new one. This is something that already had ink on it and everything. And I thought I'm just going to play around and see how much ink I want to add. So this part's really by feel. You can decide. One thing I did like was there are wrinkles in the paper because no matter how hard you try with Mod Podge, you're probably going to have some wrinkles unless you just kind of babysit it as it dries and move it around. But I wanted to play up those wrinkles to make it look even more old. So I only had about 3 good wrinkles, but I do play with them. So notice that I start out kind of light and then it gets kind of heavier in spots and I really like that look. So I go back over it in distress until I'm happy with it. You can do as much or as little as you want, but I just think that the more I added, kind of the more it felt aged, and I just liked it. So play around. And I didn't get heavy because my thing was this: I can always add more. With Distress ink, I can't take it away, and it would be harder to kind of erase the brown than it would be to erase that gesso that I did earlier. See how dark that got? I really liked how that started to look, so I got a little more heavy-handed after that. Now for the fun part. All that work has led up to this. It is time to embellish. I've taken a piece of wax paper, made myself a little palette. This is some Christmas red stickles, and I'm going to squirt some out onto my palette, and I'm going to use a brush. Now that brush, even though it's a small brush, the bristles are very flimsy, and it's one that I don't care if I throw it away. I'm not going to try to wash the glitter out of this brush. It's just a really cheap brush. I suggest you keep some brushes like that in your stash so you don't have to worry about, you know, if you use it with a glitter glue, you don't have to scrub it out. You can get rid of it. What I decided was the glitter is like a highlight. So everywhere you see highlights in his coat, I'm going to cover those with the red glitter. And I actually end up doing this in a couple of stages. I actually do the red glitter like this and let it dry, and then come back over it with another coat of the red glitter because I felt like it wasn't bright enough at first. So I go through, and everywhere his coat is highlighted, I highlight with the glitter. So now I have his coat all highlighted with the glitter, and I decided to go into the berries on the top of his hat where the holly is and just put a dot of that glitter, and that really made a difference. It made him pop. And I took some glitter and put on his cheeks, and at first I thought this may not work, but it really did. It made his cheeks really stand out because he's Santa Claus. He's going to look like snow just landed everywhere, right? So now I just go through, and anywhere I think I'd like a little bit of red glitter, I just put it in there, kind of behind him in the shadows. I play with glitter a good bit here. Now, if you know me, you know I don't like loose glitter, so stickles are my best friend, and so I use a lot of them. Any kind of glitter glue I'd rather use than loose glitter. So here you see I'm going back over that, and it's making it just a little more red, and I really like how that turned out, so I end up going over all of the red one more time. Next, I take this frosted lace stickles, and it's kind of a white glitter, and I start to use it everywhere there's hair and like white highlighting and things like that. But I do not love how it turns out, so we do have to do a little more work on that. It just didn't reflect like I wanted it to. So I'll show you what we do to correct it, but I do go ahead and apply this too. Good old silver stickles. That's how we correct it. So I go into my stash and I find my silver, and I just put some out onto my palette again, just like I did before. And I just lightly start to play with it, because to be honest, I really wanted gold, but gold would not have looked as good, I think, in his hair. I think it would have made his hair look a little dirty. So I take the silver and I start to play with it, and I realize that this is really going to do what I hoped that the white would do. So the more I play, the more I add, the more I like. So I end up painting a lot of silver. So what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to stay and let you watch the silver, but I'm just going to play some music and kind of fast forward it so you can see how that comes to life. So I have this red lace ribbon that is so pretty, and it is the perfect size to go around the outer edge of the canvas. So I'm just going to use my hot glue gun, and I'm going to run it around the outside edge of the canvas and glue this lace down. I don't do a lot of lace, so I was really glad that I had this in my collection, because it just kind of cleans that edge up and really makes that red on his suit pop as we get to the end of it. But all I do is just line this up to the edge and run it all the way around the canvas. And that's it. Hot glue that all the way around. And now that I'm at the end of the canvas, I cut about 1.5 inches extra, maybe 2 inches of the lace away. Because what I'm going to do is kind of fold this under to kind of give it like a finished edge. So I just take that ribbon, fold it in half, kind of tucking it down where it came off of the burlap canvas, and then I'll put some hot glue underneath that section and lay it down, and that way I'll get a nice clean finished edge. In hindsight, I would have moved this on down to where the pedestal is going to be, because then you wouldn't have seen it at all. So I would have kind of moved the lace to the middle of the bottom of the canvas and glued it together and not worried about tucking it, because you wouldn't have seen it at all. But it doesn't bother me because I think it looks very vintage and country. Then I just went back, and anywhere I felt like the lace wasn't sticking, I added a little more hot glue. Now I'm getting into the really fun part. These are little tiny gold jingle bells, and I love them. I've used them before on projects, and I thought this Santa needs some jingle bells. And I'm not sure what that is draped over his arm, to be honest with you. I tried to decide, but I thought to myself, that looks like maybe the reins from the reindeer. That's what we're going to say it is, and I think they would have jingle bells on them. So I tried to get my tweezers to hold these bells like, you know, normal tweezers would hold things, and it didn't work. So I put the tweezer kind of on the stem of the tweezers, put the hot glue down, and then stick those in place. Probably could have used my pickup stick, but I think this worked a little bit better for me because I could get a good hold. So I take these jingle bells, and there's 5 of them in total, and I just run them up that little strip, and it gives it that look and feel of the reins of the reindeer, and I think it looks pretty cool. So I got these little wooden snowflakes last year, and I'm not sure who makes them, but it seems like I got them at like TJ Maxx, but they were in my stash from last year. So I decided to leave them raw. I didn't paint them, I didn't ink them, I didn't do anything. I don't know why, I just felt like they kind of had the feel of as white of a snowflake as I would want to put on this canvas, because there is no white, you know, we've kind of covered it up. So I just glued those 3 down in 3 different little spots as if they were falling in that top corner. I don't know, I just kind of liked it. I played with it at first, so that's what I suggest. Find the stuff and kind of lay it out and do a dry run, and then what you like, go ahead and glue it down. That way you don't end up gluing something down and later think, I wish I wouldn't have done that. So people ask me sometimes, how do you know when something is too much or not enough? I thought I would like sequins in the middle of those snowflakes, and so I got out my sequins and I pulled out the red ones and I put them on, and I did not like the way they looked. And I want to show you this because this is how the process works. You just try it, and I just thought they're too bold or they're too bright. I don't want to take away from Santa. I want him to be the glowing part of the whole picture. So I decided no to the sequins, or actually those are gemstones. So that's exactly how you do it, trial and error. Now I did want something there, and I had remembered that in that same package that Miss Judy sent me, she sent me some buttons, and I love these. So I thought a little bit of a red button would be super cute, and they are teeny tiny. First I tried the green, and see, this is more trial and error. I'm like, there's no green on this whole canvas. This green is not working, but it was a thought because it is a Christmas color, but I do decide to go away from it. If you ever wonder if you're doing too much, or, you know, that's a question a lot of people ask me, when is enough enough? When do I know I've done it? I just kind of go, this is how I want it to feel. When I look at it, this is what I want to like. It's very important that you like what you make because you're the one who's going to be looking at it, whether it's at your house or if you give it to someone else. So when you feel like you've done enough, that's when you've done enough. So for these little buttons, because they're so tiny and so fiddly, I take my pickup stick, which is super handy because it's got that little bit of adhesive on the tip end of it, and I use it to pick up the buttons so that I can then just hot glue them straight down onto the little snowflakes. It's so much easier that way. So put a little glue, put a little button, that's all there is to it. Along the lines of when is enough enough, for some reason it just wasn't enough for me. So I took my silver stickles out again, which is almost empty by the way, and I was like, please stretch long enough to get this done. And I just squirted some around the edges, like kind of swiggly like that. Is that a word, swiggly? I don't know. And then I took the same paintbrush and I just kind of smeared it down into the edges of the paper, and this really helped. I don't know, I just felt like it was too flat around the edges, and I didn't feel like the glitter really, I don't know, it didn't have the impact that I wanted it to have when it was just on the Santa and just in that one spot. So as you can see, I just kind of swirl it around, and I'm just messing it up around the edges, and it's heavier in some places and lighter in some places, and that's fine because it just kind of gives it that shimmer out to the edges as well. It actually kind of gives the picture itself a little more meat. It kind of makes it seem more of a statement piece. So this is how you do it. You just play. Now, if you're nervous about doing this stuff, if you're nervous about adding glitter, you know, glitter's not something that's easily taken away. But in my opinion, you can always add something on top of it. You can always do another layer if you want to tone it down. So don't be afraid, just try. And if you don't like it on this one, then the next time you make one, you know that's not the same step you want to take. It's all trial and error. Just give it a go. And of course now I'm super happy with the glitter. Can you see how shimmery and beautiful it is? And you can see where it's heavier and lighter. That was a good shot. I like that because you can see all that silver. The silver really made a difference. And it's funny because I really didn't want to use the silver, but I did end up doing it. Now this little pedestal I got at Michael's on the as-is rack for like 50 cents or something like that because it had been broken and someone glued it back together, but that didn't bother me because I was going to distress it anyway. So I started out by trying to use my ink to distress it. Now this would have been okay, but the problem for me was the ink wasn't the right color and it's the darkest distress ink that I have. So I decided this was not going to work and it was time to go back to the paint that I had used earlier. But I did give this a good try. You can see I kind of rubbed the sides and got it to where I could see it, but it just didn't work. So we're going to change that up. Now, if you're a paint perfectionist, this is going to probably bother you because here's what I did. I took this dauber that I had already used on the canvas and I went messy. I did not want full coverage. I wanted it to look worn and rugged because that's the feel that I'm going for. So as I turn this around and I'm barely touching the edges and see how it's just smearing, that's exactly the look I'm going for. But I thought, you know, if you painted this solid, it would be just as pretty. It just wouldn't give the feel that I am trying to achieve. Now this little dauber will not get into those little creases there in the center where it gets really deep. You can see that's pretty much as far in as I can go. So what I do is I just open up the container and just take a paintbrush and dip in there and kind of rub some paint in. And I actually took my fingers and just rubbed it around until I got it looking like I wanted it to and good and covered. And here, for some reason, I felt it important. Oh, $1.50 is what I paid for it. I don't know why I thought 50 cents, but I felt it was important to show you that. And it was sold as is. Never miss that sold as is bin at Michael's. Yesterday, I picked up a, I think it's about an 8 by 8 inch square styrofoam block. That's regular $11.99, and I got it for $2.99. And I also got a styrofoam wreath form that was regular $8.99 that I got for like $1.99 because it was broken. Never pass that up because you just never know what you can do with that stuff. Especially if you're like me and you like to upcycle or recycle things, it's a good way to use them. So see, here's where I'm using this paint situation with the paintbrush, and I'm going to take my finger and just smear that all around. I've got the pedestal painted like I want it, and I'm going to hot glue the canvas to the pedestal. Now, this might make you nervous because you might think that this is not going to stand, and it did make me somewhat nervous. But this glue that I'm using is from Punch Place Plus, and it is amazing. So I'm putting it to the test here. It is not a clear glue, so if you're looking for a clear glue, this is not it. But this glue will hold so well. So I use the hot glue across the base, and then I just hold that canvas in place until it dries, and it does a really good job. So I'm very happy with that, and I'll leave a link to that glue below. It also stopped my dripping problem, and it has hardly any strings. I just love it, so I just wanted to tell you about that too. Now, because that pedestal is wider than my canvas is, which doesn't bother me, I think it's pretty, I needed to put something there to kind of blend them together. And these poinsettias were sent to me in the Christmas card call that I did, and I thought these will be perfect here. And what I did was I kind of folded that poinsettia in half and put glue so that I could sink it into the crease there where the canvas and the pedestal meet to be kind of an extra hold for the canvas. So this was really good. I took all 3 of these and did that with it. So you'll see here I'm going to fold that poinsettia in half. Then I'm going to take the glue and run it across all the way down, pretty heavy too, because I think it will work good to just give it a little more stability and not let the canvas fall or tip over. But when it dried, it was very sturdy. If you're nervous about that, you can always like screw some sort of base into the bottom of the canvas and then attach it to the pedestal, but this seemed to work just fine for me. And so I just do this with the 3 poinsettias, and I love how they turned out. Okay, now I get a little crazy. I do not have a finial for the top, but I do have this bead and this gem, which I've had for a very long time in my stash. So I try this, and it did work out. I take some hot glue and I put it into the end of that bead, and I take the tip of that gem and just kind of push it in. Now I have to work with it to get it straight and even, and I have to kind of hold it up and look at it and kind of maneuver it around and let it dry really well. So I do that to start. And once I have that bead together, I take another bead of hot glue and run it around where those two meet, but I didn't get that on camera, so I do add another bead of hot glue to it. And then I decide to glue it on to the top of the canvas. A pretty good bit of glue because I want it to sink up into the hole in the bead and also grab onto that lace. So then I just hot glue that in place and hold it really good. And once I feel like it's good and dry, I take my hot glue gun one more time and just run another bead of glue around the edge. Looks a little messy, but we cover it up. Now this is me covering it up. I take my paintbrush with some silver glitter, and everywhere the hot glue is, I hit it with the silver glitter so it kind of becomes silver and blended in, and it makes it look like one piece. Now ideally, I would love to have had just one finial that I could have put up there, but I didn't. And you know me, I'm going to use what's in my stash. So that's what I did. I don't think it turns out so bad. I have to hold it a little bit because it's still drying for you to see it, but not too bad really. So there it is. I'm going to show you some pictures. I think you'll be able to see it a lot better in that. So here it is all finished and standing, and I think it looks so pretty. I love all the colors together, and this is the glitter up close. The lighting doesn't make it look, I don't know, I couldn't make it look as pretty as it looks in person because it just shimmers. But I thought it'd be fun to show you some of these close-ups. So there you go, guys. Another way to use the stuff in your stash. Try to just look for things in the stores and go, can I recreate this with stuff I already have? Because I bet you can do it. All right, thanks for joining me, guys. I'll talk to you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.